What's up everyone and welcome to the weekly Q&A. Real quick before questions, we just have a reminder that we've got 2 sweepstakes going, a chance for 2 people to win this Lax Sivrak bust or this giant Darth Vader action figure, as well as a chance for 2 more people to win all 26 Star Wars emojis in the game Disney Emoji Blitz. All you have to do is download the game using the link in the description, get to level 10, and then tweet a screenshot of you at level 10 to us on Twitter, which we're already getting some of you doing, so that's great. But that's it, so now let's jump into some questions.
For our first question, Michael Barub asks why lightsabers don't require the Force to activate to prevent people like Markion Ro from using them.
I thought that was a pretty interesting idea, like having a safety on your lightsaber so that only you could access it or something like that. And Michael's talking about how like vectors in the High Republic can only be accessed by using a lightsaber. Mm-hmm. Like a Jedi has to make that decision of like, I'm going to stick my lightsaber into this vector to turn it on and activate the weapons. So why don't they do something like that for lightsabers?
I mean, you wouldn't need to be Force sensitive to steal a lightsaber and then turn it on in a vector.
I guess that's true. But like just that the idea of there being these extra safety precautions.
Yeah.
I think that the reason for it is that that's just not how the Force works. I mean, it can work that way in theory, but it's kind of the same question when we get people asking, like, why don't Jedi fly all the time? I'm like, yeah, in theory, I think they could, but like using the Force requires like a lot of thought and balance, and it's not something that like just a snap of the fingers, like, why didn't ObiWan use the Force to run faster down that hallway to get to Qui-Gon?
Yeah, we see Force speed at the very beginning of episode 1, and then we never see it again.
Right. And that was a stressful situation that they were able to use it, but like, I basically rationalize it by saying, you know, the Force isn't something that you're just like quickly turning on and off and going like, it makes me think of the Lego Terrifying Tales where Maul is like, Force flip, Force dodge, Force blah, blah, blah. Like, it's funny, but that's not really accurate.
Yeah.
And so...
Go ahead.
The idea that I have, like, I like the idea of there being the switch is inside, so there's nothing to press, you just mentally turn it on. But if you're in a stressful combat situation and you're like, well, now I have to turn on my lightsaber, let me make sure I'm in the right, like, headspace. It's something that I'm sure a Jedi would be able to practice at and easily do, but the Force is also something that you can quickly lose your concentration. And then what if you can't turn your lightsaber on?
Yeah. There's nothing that says that this has never been done before. Some Jedi at some point could have designed their lightsaber differently so that this was the case. It reminds me of there's a Jedi in the High Republic who has these like really sharp spikes that pop out of the lightsaber.
Oh, yeah. That's Ty, right?
Yeah, which is like, if anyone got a hold of it that didn't know that, I don't know if she's using the Force to make them pop out and cut their hand, or if that's just an automatic thing. Or
I think it's an automatic thing.
Is there like a thumbprint thing on her lightsaber?
Yeah, some sort of hand signature. And Ty is not a Jedi at this point, so she's like willing to do some edgier stuff to her lightsaber.
Sure.
But you're right. There's nothing to say that's never been done. And you made me think of like Edna from The Incredibles, where she's like, no capes. They're always bad. They always get people killed. Like, I could see that maybe a few Jedi were like, oh, this is a neat idea. And then they like couldn't turn their lightsabers on and they all died.
Right.
And so they were like, we're not doing that anymore.
I mean, why did Jedi even continue to carry lightsabers if they're not at war currently?
Because they're awesome?
Yeah. It's like, we could argue all day long about lightsaber stuff.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe, like, the High Republic does seem like a good time to introduce something like this, where they're like, we're not at war, and so I put my switch on the inside just to, like, see how that worked. It's kind of like Vernestra is fiddling with her lightsaber and turning it into a light whip, and I think that the High Republic is, a good time for Jedi to be experimental with their designs, but they might wind up leading to some negative consequences.
Carlos Medina wants to know our thoughts on the, quote, shelving of Rogue Squadron and the Rian Johnson trilogy.
So this story is coming from someone who used to be an editor at I almost said the High Republic, the Hollywood Reporter. Every time I see or think THR in my mind, I go to High Republic now and not the Hollywood Reporter. So I guess this person is somewhat reliable. I don't know, but the phrasing of shelving, I don't necessarily know what that means. And part of that is me coping and saying like, no, the Rogue Squadron movie is still for sure going to happen. I hope that it does. But shelving to me just means like not an active production. Kind of like people got all freaked out when they were like, the Rangers of the New Republic is not an active production. And everyone was like, it's canceled. And then they were like, no, we're still doing it. It's just not next on our plate. Mm-hmm. So I'm hopeful that that's what shelving means in this at this time.
Yeah, it's weird because like I don't know that Lucasfilm would come out and publicly say, oh, something has been canceled or shelved or, so it's really hard to say whether or not these projects are still happening. But yeah, I think it's possible that they're still in the works, but yeah, shelved for a time.
Yeah,
time being.
I wish they would come out and say something about these things. I mean, that's we get when we get communication, it's always like announcements, and then we hear later that like, oh, this thing isn't happening anymore. The Benioff and Weiss left Star Wars, and we hear that through places like the Hollywood Reporter, and not some announcement through Lucasfilm, which no one wants to go on StarWars.com and write an article about how like, this got canceled. But I wish we had some communication where people are like, yeah, we're going to do Rian Johnson's trilogy, but he's working hard on the Knives Out sequels right now. Yes, Rogue Squadron, we're still committed to doing it, but we're making sure the script is all right. Like, if they would come out and say something to us, then we wouldn't have all these, like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if they are not happening, then they're not happening, and they'll put something else out, so.
I do not accept that. Rogue Squadron must happen. No, like, I keep laughing because it's like me and a couple dozen, like, diehard pilot fans are like, a Rogue Squadron movie, yes! And then I've seen plenty of people being like, really? That's going to be the next film? Mm. And I do kind of think that fits better for a streaming series rather than, like, I think the movies should focus on bigger galactic events, introduce us to a new area of the galaxy, and then the streaming series can kind of like focus in on stuff. And as long as we get a live action or even an animated, as long as we keep getting pilot stories, I'll be okay, I guess.
Trevin Pettigrew asks, if it's not hello there, what iconic Obi-Wan line will serve as his first line in the Kenobi series?
The first one that popped into my head was, I have the high ground. And then I'm like, okay, how does that work? So we start kind of like the camera is pointing up at the domed ceiling of his hut. And we hear like, it's over, Anakin, I have the high ground. You underestimate my power. And we slowly pan down to see that Obi-Wan is recreating the fight with action figures just to show his mental state at this point in time. 10 years have gone by. And maybe at this time he's like, don't try it. And Anakin's like, you're right, let's hug. And he's like, yay. So
I think this is totally possible. We saw people playing with action figures at the end of The Last Jedi.
That's true. So now Obi-Wan's going to do it.
I don't know. Something about being someone being so uncivilized. Maybe
that's perfect.
In the cantina.
We start with the camera pointed at the cantina ceiling, and we hear so uncivilized, and we pan down, and Obi-Wan's the only one left standing. He's beat up everyone in the bar.
Yeah. Brandon Velasquez wants to know, what is something we think canon has done better than Legends?
I'll do both, just to be fair. And my answers are kind of similar. I think that canon has more quickly given us more variety, and I mean that more in the types of stories being told. Like, obviously we're getting more movies, we're getting streaming series, which is brand new, continued to get animated series, but they've also branched out into like audio dramas and I don't know, various Star Wars stories that I just wouldn't have expected to see. I do think it took a little while to get to that point. It took us 4 or 5 years. But that is something that I'm excited to see, that it's just like, there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah. The first thing that came to my mind was Palpatine. Just the fact that in Legends he had 1 million clones of himself.
Did you watch The Rise of Skywalker?
Yes. You know what I mean. Just the way that they did cloning in Legends was awfully silly. There's a lot of things in Legends that are just kind of silly to look back on.
I do think that The Rise of Skywalker is a more toned down, slightly more grounded take on the Dark Empire story. So I do agree with that. I have fond memories of Dark Empire and reading it because I really liked the art style. But even as a kid, I was like, Palpatine's back? But he came back like at least 2 times in Legends. So yeah, there's that too. So far, Palpatine's only come back once.
Yeah.
The inverse, what I would say that Legends did better than canon, and part of that is just the nature of the fact that we're getting streaming series and more movies and stuff, that's where all of the big important stories take place, whereas Legends, it was kind of like every single book you read. And maybe it was just because I was a young kid reading more Star Wars, but in my mind, looking back, I'm like, man, all of these books are like super important and change the galaxy in some way. And especially in early canon, it was a lot of like, this book is about Tarkin. This book is about Phasma. And they're fine books, but I was just kind of like missing the big galaxy changing stuff like the High Republic is doing.
Yeah, they don't feel as big picture, I guess, when you know that there's more they could be telling, but maybe they can't because of the restrictions, I guess, with canon. Yeah,
I think that's something and that's just the nature of a big universe like this, is that it does feel like they're holding back sometimes, where it's like, oh, this story could have been a lot bigger and a lot more expansive, but they're saving that stuff for live action or animation or whatever, and they want those big stories to be on the big screen and not in a book so much.
Yeah.
So it is what it is, but that's...
The bigger the story in canon, the more trouble it is to make sure you're not retconning anything or running into continuity problems. So it's a little bit more limiting in that way. So Legends was able to really get big with their stories and go nuts with the connections.
I mean, yeah, for a while it was just books and comics and some video games, and the video games ramped up definitely towards the end. But it was just like a bunch of authors being like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And they would kind of like collaborate with each other. But there weren't any movies coming out, so they could do whatever they wanted. And they would work with each other to connect things. And it just was a simpler process. And now it's like, yeah, we have book writers, comic writers, screenwriters, television writers. Like, there's so many different things going on. I'm sure it's hell to keep track of it all.
Tony Jake asks who we predict will die at the end of Phase 1 of the High Republic. Oh no.
That's their big thing. They're already showing us, like on covers and stuff, that Starlight Beacon is going to explode, and the posters say, who will survive? And I'm like, can't they all survive? Probably not. I mean, they've already shown us that they're willing to kill some fan favorites.
I'm going to say Avar Kriss.
I could see that.
They haven't, like, super gone into her character that deep yet, have they?
I would say they're doing it more in the comics. She was, like, front and center for Light of the Jedi, not so much in the Rising Storm, because she was dealing with the Dringir in the comics. So, having been keeping up with all of those, I really like that Keeve Trennis, who is like the main character of the comics, she first meets Avar and is like, she's got Avar up on this pedestal, like, oh my gosh, it's Avar Kriss, like, this is amazing. And I think that Avar is kind of not going off the deep end, but like, she's making some questionable choices, and I could see her like losing luster in Keeve's eyes, just like this fallen hero idol.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see that after Avar continues to kind of go down that path.
I have another one, but I'm afraid of your reaction.
Say it.
Porter Engle.
No.
I think he could be one to just like go out in a blaze of glory.
I won't be surprised if he doesn't make it through the whole thing. Man, you're right though. Like I could see him just kicking ass and like sacrificing himself to save as many lives as he can on Starlight Beacon.
Yeah.
But they've already taken so much from us. I don't want them to take Porter too.
Yeah.
My guess is going to be Skier. These are also comic guesses, and like I'm talking about Avar going a little bit off the deep end. Like Skier definitely has.
Mm-hmm.
He is really struggling with the dark side. I could also see Tarek or Sarek, one of the Bond twins, going. Although I don't know if one of them dies, if they both die, but they're in rough shape right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess I'm mostly thinking about comic characters, but I think everyone else is gonna be fine.
That's it for our patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon, where we leave every submitted question a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. We have tons of other rewards like audio commentaries for the films and every new Star Wars series premiering on Disney+. We also record video reactions to every new series as we watch them for the first time. We're doing book clubs to discuss every new Star Wars book as they release. We have behind-the-scenes content, comic reactions every Wednesday, and more. All of that is available right now on our Patreon if you're interested.
On to YouTube questions. Seb Mess asks if it's possible for Vader and Kenobi's rematch to be part of Kenobi's trials to become a Force ghost.
We've floated that idea out a couple of times, and it is something that I like, because I'm being a little grumpy. I think I'm over it, where I'm like, yeah, he's going to leave Tatooine. He's going to face Vader, confront him face to face. I've accepted that that's going to happen, but for a while I was like resistant to the idea. I wanted him to like be all about his mission on Tatooine to protect Luke, and he doesn't leave. So I was like, yeah, maybe it's more of a spiritual journey and a vision, kind of like Yoda has in season 6 of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, it's possible, but I feel like they're not going to get too deep into like what the trials are to become a Force ghost, especially not in this particular series. It might be implied, but I don't think like at the end of the series someone's going to be like, all right, now you can be a Force ghost when you do decide to die.
Qui-Gon shows up with like a little graduation cap and cloak, like, you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. As much as I would really like to see them explore that, I think it's a little much for the casual audience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people want to see Darth Vader fight Obi-Wan Kenobi again.
Yeah. Not a lot of people realize that there are trials or training
right
to become a Force ghost. It's just kind of a quick line at the end of episode 3.
Yeah.
And
that is true. I was thinking about the Clone Wars more than episode 3, but they do at least reference it in live action, so that makes it a little more likely. Again, I'd love to see them talk about that. I just don't think it's going to be a big focus of the show. I also think that a lot of people would be upset if they had their duel and then like there was it was all a dream moment. I think people would not take that well. I mean, people got mad that Luke wasn't on Crate.
Yeah.
When they were like, he was just a vision. It was like, I mean, it doesn't really change the story. Like, I think that would be kind of like dangling. They're going to fight. Never mind.
Mm-hmm. Hans Mork Tophole wants to know why Project War Mantle is listed under structural engineering on Scarif in Rogue One.
I thought that was pretty funny.
It's a good catch.
And a good catch, yeah. So Jin is reading out all of the secret code names before they find Stardust, and one of them is War Mantle. And then we learn later that War Mantle is the project of changing clone troopers over to stormtroopers. So why is that listed under structural engineering?
I don't think it matters, but I don't know.
I do have they just made a fun little Easter egg connection, and all us nerds, including me, got like real excited. Like, they said war mantle.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't even think about...
Maybe they're just really sloppy in how they organize that stuff on Scarif.
I think, here's my theory, because this is what we do. We take questions that don't matter, but I'm still going to try to figure this out. We see on that planet where we actually see the stormtroopers, the TK troopers, and the Republic commandos, and this thing is built into a mountain. You probably need a structural engineer for that. So this is like, war mantle is probably in a bunch of different data towers, and some of it was involving the construction where they train some of these troopers.
Yeah, I think that's a solid reason. Jack Johnson asks if we'd rather see the Old Republic through a movie trilogy or a streaming series.
I think the inevitable answer is both. But kind of like we were just talking about earlier, I think it makes a lot of sense to introduce the world of Star Wars fandom to a new era on the big screen. So if we're going to do the Old Republic, let's explore what that era was like, and we'll find the biggest conflict of that era, and that's what we will show. And so we'll see Jedi fighting Sith, and that'll be a trilogy of movies, let's say. And then they'll go into the streaming series and they'll focus in on spin-off characters or new characters set in the same era, and then we'll do it with books and comics. Like, I could kind of see each era having their own little like column of content.
Yeah, I was also going to say movies, just because it feels like a very big era that's, I feel like it couldn't be done justice to like introduce with a streaming series. And you're right, like, no matter how they start it, it's going to bridge into all these other little things because synergy.
Right. I also think that it's just something that has enough brand recognition, the Old Republic by itself. It's mentioned in the movies. Obviously, there are a ton of video games that have massive amounts of fans. Like, I think that would make sense for the next series of films. Like, there's the rumor floating around now that either the next movie will be Old or High Republic. And I think it makes more sense to go Old, just because I think that has more fans. But there is the flip side of, if they're doing a High Republic movie, I think it's interesting that they have done exactly the opposite of what I just said.
Right, started with books.
Yeah, and kind of introduce us to the era that way and then make it larger and larger. I don't know. I don't know what the best way to do it is. I mean, I'm definitely excited at the prospect of a High Republic movie because I'm loving the books. So I guess it could work either way.
Yeah. They might just be testing the waters for, trying it this way, and then later down the line, they'll introduce Old Republic with movies.
Yeah, maybe they're doing both.
Go the opposite way, and eventually we'll get Old Republic books and comics. Alex Blanco wants to know if Moses Ingram and Sung Kane will play original or existing Inquisitors.
Well, let's first say that that's rumor at this point, speculation. I think both of them have said, like, my character has a lightsaber. And now we can basically say for sure that Jedi hunters are in this series, and we saw concept art of an Inquisitor. So let's say if they're both playing Inquisitors, I would like to see one of them play one we know, and one of them play a new one. Best of both worlds.
What are they? Which Inquisitors do you think they're rumored to be playing? I've heard the fifth brother.
Yeah, the rumor I have heard is that Sung Kang is the fifth brother. But
anyone else for the second one?
Not that I've heard.
I think that they're probably going to be existing Inquisitors.
Well, there's still a couple numbers that we haven't seen, because they're all like, what, Grand Inquisitor, Second Sister. I don't think we have 3 or 4 yet. Then we got 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th? I can't remember if 11th's been done. But yeah, I think there's still plenty of room for them to do a new design, which they like to do. So I think I'd like to see one new character and one familiar. Because the connections are always fun. Be like, oh, we saw him in animation and now he's in live action. Yay. But I would like to see, I guess, Moses play the fourth or third. We also don't know if like every number had a brother and a sister, or how that worked.
Yeah.
It's very I think it's SEAL Team 6. Our friend Matt was telling me about how like SEAL Team 6 is named that way specifically to cause confusion.
What is that?
Like it's like a real world Navy SEAL team.
Oh.
But they're named that way to cause confusion as to like, well, how many SEAL teams are there?
It worked.
Right. And so I'm like, the Inquisitors are kind of the same way. It's like, wait, how many Jedi hunters are there in the galaxy? We don't know.
Interesting. I like that theory. They all get to pick their own numbers.
I'm the 53rd, brother. It just goes like 1 through 10 to 53.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for questions today. If you want to leave a question for next week's video, just put it in the comments below or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
And as always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.